So it looks like people will start trickling in. Hello, Houston.
Hi.
Nice to see you, or actually nice to meet you. This is the first time.
Yeah.
So as people are coming in, as they can, I think we can just start the QA now. If you have questions, start rolling them in.
Okay, so I'm at the very beginning of RB 101, like just finished lesson 2 or so. And the general advice in the course is to use PEDAC for every problem that you see. Do you apply this to literally every problem? Like even in the easy set, the medium set, it doesn't matter. You always use it? That's basically my question.
Well, the answer for me at least is no. It really depends. I kind of know, at least when I was practicing for the Ruby 109 interview, I would use it more often. But like some exercises, I kind of read it and I immediately know the solution, right? And then I just answer it. I don't kind of stick to the form strictly, but speaking more generally, when you're solving your own problems for your own projects, I've kind of evolved my own problem-solving process that's similar to PEDAC. It's kind of based on the same ideas where you want to be thinking about one thing at a time, one layer of the problem before going deeper, so that you're not trying to hold too many pieces together in your mind at any given time, then you get stuck. But let's say for a large project, the layers kind of are deeper than a small problem you might solve for the Ruby 109 assessment. So you have to kind of adapt and kind of spend more time at kind of making a map of what the whole project entails before looking at every module, how you might do it, and then actually implementing it comes usually pretty late. At least that's how I do it, and I found it's beneficial.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah. Perfect.
So hello, everyone. For those of you who joined in, you're welcome to ask your questions. And again, this is more intended to be like more of a roundtable conversation. If there are people here who are like also in the later courses, they're welcome to pitch in their answers. Or really anyone can pitch in the answer if they feel they have something meaningful to share. Yeah, so go ahead, you can ask questions.
I have kind of a question / comment kind of. So I'm in JS 101, lesson 5, and I started launch school at the beginning of July. And so the context of this is like launch school talks about mastery-based learning, yet there's this thing called Parkinson's law, if people are familiar with it, right? That things take up the amount of time that you allocate to them. And so my kind of confusion question has to do with like, how do you reconcile launch school's mastery-based, go at your own pace curriculum with being goal-oriented and not having all the time in the world, right? I mean, I wish, but I mean, there's obviously other considerations in my life, as well as like, I mean, eventually I'd like to graduate and get a full paying job, right? And so like, there's this kind of tension I have between like, yes, I want to learn things really well and deeply and master them, but I also like need to get through stuff too at the same time, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably everyone here has had some of that kind of tension, or if you experience some of that tension. But by the way, I'm curious, can you repeat the name of the law? I'm familiar with it, just I haven't heard.
It's called
I don't know.
Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law. Parkinson. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
Parkinson's law?
Parkinson's.
Okay. Huh. Okay. I'm surprised that's what it's called.
It's named after the person who talked about it first, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, does anyone want to chime in and kind of answer maybe their experience with this, tell their experience with this kind of a tricky thing? Do you try to be really goal-oriented and go for completing the course? And how do you balance that with taking your time to master the concepts?
So I'm not gonna answer the question really. I just want to say that I feel the same way. So there's all this pressure that you have to finish, you have to get a job, you have for so many reasons, and that what is happening to me at least is that while I go over the lessons for when I start a course, I have this tendency to want to hit that finish assignment button and get to the next one and to the next one. But when I finish the whole course and it's assessment time, then I realized that you have to go over the things that you didn't pay much attention to because you were in a hurry. You have to reread them, and it's gonna take you more time because you were trying to get things over with. So basically, yeah, there's no way to, I think, to actually be very comfortable with what you're learning if you constantly have this feeling that you have to finish everything. Of course, I have this all the time. I'm just sharing my experience as well. It's not.
Thank you for sharing, Antonia. Like I've had like similar things. I'll share in a moment. Does anyone else want to talk about this? Maybe tell a story. Then I'll kind of share. Like I think this really depends a lot on factors in your situation personally.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I'm living with my dad. I have almost no responsibilities besides doing this. So like and also basically I have just like full carte blanche to do anything I want. Just get a job someday. And don't slack off. So for me, kind of the pressure and the environment around me is really zero. It's really if I feel pressure, it's coming from within me, and I think. Sorry, just someone sent a question. I'll read those later. For me, I've had kind of a transition. I think more at the beginning of the program, I was really kind of committed to just taking as much time as I need to, and really like how to like digging in and feeling really solid before I continue to take the assessment and go to the next course. And as a result, I think I took much longer than kind of I needed to, basically. Like I think many times I had study sessions and people tell me, Iuliu, you're totally ready to take this assessment. People who've taken the assessment. And I would be like, no, no. Like for me, like I wanted to feel more confident before doing it. And since starting the front end part, I've been more kind of like setting clear boundaries. Like I'm gonna take the assessment more aggressively before I feel confident. And funny enough, I still aced like all of assessments, even though I'm taking less time. I'm still learning, but that constraint kind of prevented it from kind of overflowing unnecessarily. Though in part, I think that was possible maybe because I took my time, especially at the beginning, and I got used to the flow of learning. I developed an intuition for knowing what concepts I've mastered, what I haven't, what I'm still fuzzy on, what is like really solid, and that helped me. I feel there was more I wanted to add to this, but I can't recall all the little ideas. Yeah, I feel like part of doing launch school for me has been to learn to be really patient, because before launch school, I'd studied JavaScript and web development for about 8 months on my own and with people, different resources outside launch school. And I knew I wanted to learn JavaScript really deeply, that this was like a fundamental thing I needed to get right if I wanted to upgrade my skills. And so I picked up a book and I started studying like really meticulous. I picked this one that was like, I thought it was really good. And what would happen is that I would start and things would move more slowly than my expectations. I'd get discouraged. I'd stop. And then I'd come back to it after a couple of weeks and I'd forgotten some stuff. I'd studied some more and I'm discouraged because I forgot a bunch of stuff and it just keeps going like that. Eventually I was like fed up with it. I'm like, I need something, a different environment to learn in. And eventually I started searching around and found launch school. But when I decided, or when I learned about launch school and saw their methodology, like immediately for me, it was like, now I can take my time. Now I know like this is kind of the path and there's kind of a certainty to it. Before I was like, yeah, I can learn enough and then try getting my foot into a job and then see what happens from there. But after this is like, I felt I had permission to really take my time and understand things. Though I was still have moments where I'm like, oh, I want to go faster and so on. But over time, just learn to really take the time to understand concepts well. And yeah, this is kind of the main point I want you to remember about my answer. What matters isn't so much about the time you take the course, but knowing what concepts you need to understand and knowing where you are on that scale or kind of axis of understanding. Is it you're still kind of like just listening an explanation about the concept is still like high cognitive load, it's difficult to understand the explanation? Or you know, have you assimilated the concept so well in your mental models that it takes up very little cognitive load and you can just apply it intuitively, right? There's a kind of a transition there from high cognitive load to low cognitive load. And you want to know where you are and what details you're missing. So in the later courses, even though I had this intention, like, let me sort of be to the point about taking these courses and not let them drag on, because I could see clearly these are the concepts I need to understand. And I could see clear where I am and what I need to do to kind of mature my understanding. I could just be like, I understood this, I understood this, I understood. Okay, I'm ready to go, right? So for me, that's the balance. It's like, take that goal-oriented approach and instead of applying it to like plans and deadlines, I'm applying it to the concepts I need to master. And I know, then time just becomes relative to how aggressive can I learn, how much can I practice and flesh out, mature my mental models. Does that answer your question, Yosin?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Do you have any follow-up questions about what I said?
I'm not sure if it's a follow-up question, but one thing that I'm curious about, I don't necessarily know that anyone here can answer it, but you know how we have quizzes at the end of each lesson? And I mean, we get told in advance that they're very challenging and difficult. But to me, it seems like it's not, if they're so difficult, it's not an accurate measure of what you know at that point, which I find kind of confusing. And I understand that they say all those things, but wouldn't you want a quiz to be more an accurate marker of your understanding of the material at that point, rather than it being so difficult that, like, for me, like getting 50% on a quiz is very discouraging. And I know we're not supposed to like take too much stock of that, but still, it's just like, you know, and then I know, I mean, I think there's definitely usefulness in taking the quizzes and seeing where your shortcomings are, but it's not really a question. I just find that it's an interesting pedagogical approach that I'm questioning. So that's it.
Yeah. Does someone want to maybe? How do you feel about these quizzes? If someone wants to share. For me, I think it's great that there are because honestly, I really do not factor it in at all, like as far as the results. In fact, I actually, let's say this JS 230 course, before I even like really looked at the lessons, I just took all the quizzes. And on some of them, I think I got like 20%. And for me, it's just like, it's kind of my introduction.
Right. There was a
And-
whole Slack channel thread about the approach to it. I know, I remember reading that. I was thinking that was very interesting. Like, take the quiz first before you even do the lesson, right? That's an approach, I guess.
Because the thing is, it's like, this is the practice. This is the testing your understanding. And yeah, they go very detailed and very like, kind of like, sometimes it feels like you just need to understand the definition very correctly to answer a question well, or sometimes some detail. And like, it just ends up being practice. Like, it's like you're doing your reps at the gym, like to grow your muscles. Like maybe you pick up a weight that's a little too heavy, but you get stronger.
Again, I'm very new to the course, but on the quizzes, like it's pretty clear that, at least for me, it's good at finding the gaps in my knowledge. Because when I'm answering the question, I'm almost completely confident I know what I'm doing. And then the answer clearly shows you where you're wrong. Yeah. So if it was a terrible measure of where I'm at, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like I would just be like, this is completely unfamiliar. But the question is crafted well for the most part. And what they say in the course material is that solving medium level problems comfortably will prepare you for the assessment. So that's the only line I have in my mind. Once I'm done the course material and I move on to the exercises, I should be comfortably solving medium level problems. Other than that, the quizzes, the assignments, everything else, like Iuliu said, it's just practice. So that's kind of how I approach it right now.
I remember taking one of the quizzes and being really, really excited when I got the results back. Because when I took the quiz, that was one of the questions that I was like, this may be me being nitpicky, but this answer isn't right because of this. Like, it's just like really small detail and stuff. And then I got the results back and it was the correct answer. And I was like, yes, like these people get me. And that level of precision, I think, is very necessary in what we're doing, because that small thing, it can change everything. So yeah, it's difficult, but like he said, it's finding the gaps in our knowledge, and that level of precision is what we need. So no, I don't think that it's inaccurately representing what we need to learn in order to do well in what we're doing.
Yeah, like enjoy the 20%. Or I don't know, see if you can. I think it can be fun. It's like a prediction game. Like you have your mental model, you make some predictions, and then they might be incorrect, and you learn something. I'll read the questions Nirad sent in the chat. Are you continuing with Capstone soon? When did you start applying for your cohort? How long did it take you? How many days were you putting in? Okay. So yeah, I think I want to do the Capstone cohort join the Capstone cohort starting in January. And the core completion date for that cohort, like to apply, is like mid-November. So I think I'm like set for doing that if it all works out well. And yeah, you apply to Capstone after you complete core. And since I haven't done it, I haven't applied. Though I did let my Chris know that I'm interested in Capstone, like around the midpoint mark. And he was like, good, talk to me later, basically. And how long did it take you? I think I learned, so about 2 years ago, like in August, oh no, we're in September now. So a little more than 2 years ago is the first time someone told me like, go, you can learn websites and make money building websites. Like I was actually looking for like some side hustle to make money besides my job. I was asking people, and a web developer said, hey, you can just learn to make websites. And he sent me, like, we kept in touch, we're like good friends now, and he sent me an email, like the web developer roadmap. I don't know if you've seen that around. Kind of just like, it's pretty popular. It's like just a diagram showing kind of all the different things web developers know as tools, basically. And from there, I just started learning online. So that was about 2 years ago. And then only about a year later did I start like the launch school, the paid courses. I think in about May, so about like 8 months later, August 2020, I believe. And then May 2021, I found out, May or June, I found out about Launch School. And I started the prep courses and kind of joining the community. And then I think in September or August, I started the paid courses. Let me check. So it's been about a year since I started the paid courses, and I'm in the last course. And as far as like time, days, it's I don't measure that basically. Because I really mix in a lot of stuff outside of launch school into my learning. So there's no like clear thing where I'm doing launch school and then like maybe I'm learning about something at launch school and then I Google other things. That's for me. Let me look at my subscription billing. 08/2020. That's August 9th is when I started the paid courses last year. So it's been about a year. No, actually more than a year now, 13 months. And yeah, I've been doing this full time, basically, and just trying to work harder every day, like refining my routine, how I take care of myself and my energy so that I can really have the energy to build and learn and do stuff in the community here. So from the morning to the evening, basically. That's my answer. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Send it in the chat. Okay. Thanks.
Iuliu, can I ask, just, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it,
Iuliu.
Iuliu? Okay, yeah. Are you in the US?
I'm in Canada, in Montreal, Canada.
Okay. Okay, yeah. I'm just asking about Capstone. Well, I'm in Europe and I'm probably not doing Capstone, so I was just curious if you were in Europe, because I think there's only one student from Europe that has done Capstone so far.
Yeah, so I'm not in Europe. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I do believe there's more. I think there's at least two from the UK. I've heard of that. I believe, or I'm not sure. It might have been just one.
Okay.
So open for questions again.
Oh, yeah. So when you were working on the assignments, would you basically work on them from beginning to end, and until you finished, you wouldn't move on to the next lesson, essentially? Like the ones we submit for code review on the forums. Because I've noticed it, at least now, it's taking me a lot longer than just lessons, like probably 5 to 8 hours, depending on the assignment. So yeah, I just wanted to know your approach.
For me, I never do things sequentially, at least with learning. Like I said, like when I start the course, I do all the quizzes. And then when I see everything, I sort of pick what I want and slowly kind of develop things. And when I was like in 109, 101, like I do like, I skip the first assignment, do the second one, and then do the first. It's really basically what I enjoy, that I'll do. And I just get to a point where I'm really good at everything.
So I hear a lot of comments about code reviews. When do you think it's appropriate to have a code review? Is that like when you're having trouble with your code? What are some of the benefits of having somebody review your code?
You're talking about the assignments?
Yeah, so on the assignments, there's like a forum page where you can request a code review of your code for the assignment.
Well, for me, I just submitted in for code review when I was done. So I haven't had a situation where I got stuck. Like I would say, I guess if I got stuck, then I'd probably like take a break and come back. But sometimes, let's say on my own projects, I do get just generally stuck on some issues, and I call a friend and I start explaining it to them, and that helps. So maybe you could do that, like if you're stuck, like hop in the Slack and ask a TA, like try to break down what exactly you're stuck on. It kind of explain it clearly.
So you did code reviews every assignment?
At the beginning, yes. Like more recently, I think I just skipped some assignments entirely, again, because I felt I was confident with the concepts that they were developing that practice, because I'd practiced them in other ways.
Okay.
More questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So regarding personal projects, how would you say that you have an idea about a project that is not too sophisticated, but then again, it's not very easy compared to what you've done. So how do you kind of, determine whether it's something that you can actually do. I mean, you could possibly do anything, but I mean something that won't discourage you very much for someone at the beginning, that doesn't have a lot of experience doing projects on their own.
It's kind of, maybe it's tough for me to answer since I've done many projects on my own, so I'm not really familiar with maybe I don't empathize well enough to understand how it feels to start something and kind of be totally independent with doing a project for the first time. For me, it's been many times I've done that kind of thing. So now I have a good feeling, like I have tons of ideas, like I have like an idea like database. And I know some just maybe like 10 years before I can do it because they involve so much. They involve like machine learning, more computer sciencey things I need to understand, more scientific. I might do it together with people. Like I have a feeling like, oh, this will take all these pieces. These pieces I got down. These pieces I'm gonna get, but all the rest is gonna take a while. But maybe the kinds of ideas you're having are kind of close enough to what you're doing that maybe instead of starting with the idea itself, start with something kind of the simplest version. Like, for example, right now I'm working on a project that scrapes like web apps for data. And so usually these kind of web crawlers, what they can do is that they can just request a web page and read that web page and then get the information. But if you want to scrape a web app that loads with JavaScript, then it gets more complicated. So I have this project in mind. I know I've kind of broken it down into pieces, a bit like PEDAC. Like I know the different aspects of the problem, kind of at a high level, what it will take. And I know from my investigation, okay, I'll need to use like this tool. Like these are the libraries that are really useful for this problem. And then instead of just trying it, I'm gonna take my time and kind of learn the library. Like the library, I'm gonna create a little like playground, and I'm gonna try to make it work with the simplest example. Just like, let's say for me, like for this project, it's like open the browser and visit this page. That's like the first step.
Yeah.
Even that it can take a while because there's like I had some tricky issues with getting to run on Linux, right? But once you've done that, like the simplest thing, then you can add complexity, and you'll find that if you go step by step, even like this, you'll get stuck sometimes. Like right now, I'm stuck with that project because it uses some like complicated like asynchronous stuff, and I don't understand like one bit. Like I was just kind of trying things, and then I realized, oh, I don't understand what's going on, and now I need to basically go back to something simpler and take my time to understand the pieces and then start building the complexity again. So that's one example, but basically this is the pattern I follow with other projects. Like I've worked on a browser extension, or I'm still working on it. And basically before doing the actual project, I read the documentation and kind of basically it's almost like I took it as a launch course. Like they introduce different concepts there. They have some like practice assignments in the documentation, and I do them. I take my time to understand the fundamental concepts there, and then I do like the simplest thing. And then once I do the simplest thing, thank you, Nirav. Take care. yeah, once I do the simplest thing, I add complexity little by little. And every step of the way, I try to be deliberate and aware of what I'm doing, why, and understand everything. Because
Yeah.
I think sometimes, let's say, if people starting out web development, they might pick up a tool like React. It's a popular like front-end framework for creating web apps, and they use it. And there's like React is like a bunch of layers of complexity, a bunch. If you use something like Create React App, there's a bunch of complexity that's abstracted beneath. And if you start with that, maybe you'll understand its basics, but once you come to the limitations of that box, you might get stuck. And then you'll need to start subtracting the layers until you've come back to the simplest thing. At launch pool, you're kind of starting with the simplest thing. Let's say in the JS 230 course, you're starting with the browser APIs, with the DOM, really the fundamentals, and then you're building up the complexity. So once you get to the React, you already have like a good chunk of the things beneath it down. So yeah, just be aware how if you want to do something, start with the simplest thing, the simplest version. I think you're like in 185, 175, Antonia, is that it?
171.
Okay. So let's say you want to do some kind of web app, like write a server, you visit a page, it serves a page. Maybe when you click something, it does like CRUD operation, create a to do, update a to do, delete a to do, and so on.
Yeah.
Start with the simplest thing. Start with writing the server that responds hello world. Okay, and then add a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And that's how I think you can develop your confidence. Like some projects that I've done now, if I show them to you or I show them to people and they're like, whoa, this is intense. Like it looks really complex for like what it is. And what it became that complex. It's like an organism, right? The project starts, it's very simple, and then I add gradually, and then I have some problem, and I need to add some complexity to deal with that problem, and then it keeps growing till it's kind of whoa. And in fact, every project, like every piece of software that you'll work with in the industry will kind of be really complex. Like these are things I'm working just on my own for a couple of months and they're kind of complex. But you look at a piece of open source software and just the project folder is like there's 40 things at the top level, right? There's a bunch of configuration. There's so much stuff. If you go back to the first commit, it won't look like that. It will look, that'll be the simplest thing. So anyway, that's a different point, how to deal with that when you're reading or joining code bases like that. That's something you shouldn't worry about unless you're trying to do that now. But yeah, start with the simplest thing, understand what it is you're doing. Or at least if you don't understand, when you get stuck, notice that it isn't because you suck. It's because you haven't taken the time to understand the things that are blocking you right now. Like with my web scraper thing, like I got stuck because I was goofing around with it. And then I'm like, okay, now it's time to study. Right?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Hi, Rich.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
I'm good. I do have a question. Seeing how, since you were able to, you're at the last leg of your journey of the core, I'm sure you've tested and tried different methods and tools of, what worked for you. Like I see the whiteboard behind you and I'm sure, you have it there because it works for you, right? Is there Was there anything that you tried before and you found that it didn't work and was a waste of time? Like for me, for example, I've tried using Anki cards for a little bit and then I've realized that it wasn't for me. But I wanted to see like what worked for you. Have you tested different things out?
Yeah, constantly, nonstop. I'm testing things out and kind of evolving not just my methods, my tools, but my systems for like everything I do, from learning to building things to communicating with others. Let me just fill my cup of water. So yeah, I've definitely tried tons of things, and some of them didn't work out. Just I'm very concerned about getting quality sleep, and I bought this like $1,000 blanket that cools you. And I was really like bullish on this, like because it had great reviews. Tim Ferriss was saying like it's bliss. I was sold, and it just really sucked. I don't know. Like, one of the worst purchases of my life, right? Now I have to live with that. Like I can't tell my dad. He would just like, what? What did you do? For example. So I've tried things. This kind of like tangential example. I think maybe let me focus on ways of learning. Yeah, about Anki. Like I used Anki for about 6 months, 7 months. Like from pretty soon when I started learning web development, I kind of started using it. I just started Googling like how to learn web development, and I found out about that kind of software, spaced repetition software. And yeah, I dropped it, and now I use another tool called SuperMemo. And I don't recommend it to anyone here. It's made by this like basically a mad Polish scientist. That's what I call it. And people, it's in the, I say that in an endearing way. People in the SRX community just love his eccentricness. But it's a piece of, he's the one who started SRS software. And that was back in like the 1990s. And the software, the interface hasn't changed much since then. So, but still, I like bit the bullet, so to speak, and learned to use it. And now I won't go back, but like unless you're just like some super nerd for flashcards, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, like this isn't like really about your question, but I just want to say like I recommend you try flashcards again, because it's not like a pill that solves your problem, so to speak. Like it's not. It's a tool that you need to understand how to use, and it really works for certain things. If those things matter to you, it can be a good tool. And like I talked about this in the last QA session, but it's really a skill you develop for doing flashcards. And the whole point of flashcards is to not to understand or learn things, but to maintain your memories about things you've learned already. And that's probably one of the first things people get wrong. Like you're creating flashcards as soon as you start learning a topic, when really creating the flashcards, the QA question answer cards, are something you do at the end of the learning process, and it's meant to make sure you have the pieces of memory there, so that when you're in the situation where you need to use the concept, you can recall all the pieces and use it immediately. I kind of don't want to dig into that because there's a lot, and that wasn't your question. So,
but that's very valuable. That's a very different way of thinking about flashcards, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think most people, including myself, like we use flashcards to learn, but not to recall, like so to speak. Like you're saying, like we're creating the flashcards as we're reading like topics on the reading the concepts. So I wrote that down. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I guess while we're at it, I want to share, this is like the Bible, so to speak, of flashcards, how to use them. It's called the 20 Rules of Knowledge Formulation. It gives the essential principles for how to use them in order to kind of maintain your memories. So this wiki page is sort of like a meta page about it, but you'll see in the introduction, there's a link to the actual 20 rules. And this is actually written by that mad Polish scientist I was talking about. You can read his wiki, it's so out of the box. Anyhow, and there's another article too that's kind of passed around the community by this physicist that uses and software engineer or computer scientist, I don't know. He works on quantum computing, who has had like extensive experiments with flashcards and specifically with Anki. And I think just reading his kind of his story, breaking it down, like that, it's basically a long essay called Augmenting Cognition about using flashcards as a memory aid. And I think reading his story and how he approaches it is insightful for a beginner. And even for me, like I could use reading that again. And yeah, other things I've tried. Yeah, it's kind of tough to answer because I've tried, like I said, I try things in kind of all areas of my life. I'm kind of evolving it. Yeah, one thing that hasn't worked for me, like I mentioned earlier, I don't track time at all. I have kind of other ways of providing structure and feedback and awareness of how I'm spending my time. But when I started, what I did was like create like a spreadsheet of the whole day, like every minute of the day, how I spend it. So this is when I quit my job and started learning full time, like almost 2 years ago. And basically I made a commitment, like I put money like $200 that per week, that for that week I work 8 hours a day, like on my web development, like learning projects and so on. And it was the most miserable thing I ever did. I think I made that commitment for 8 weeks. Right? So any week that I failed, I'd pay like, I don't think it was 200. I think it was like $150. And I had like a referee. I would show him my spreadsheet, like of the times I worked at the end of the day, and he would like check off. So that's the first thing I tried for providing myself structure, and it was a total failure because basically learning and web development and business too, what I was trying at the time was to do a business selling websites and digital marketing services. They're all discovery processes. Like you're constantly discovering new things about what you're trying to learn or what you're trying to build, and you need to respond and adjust to that. Not only that, but you're also human, and the unexpected things happen. You get sick, you're unmotivated, you're really depleted of energy, but you made a commitment to work 8 hours a day. And you can't go out of it or you'll go broke. So basically by putting that kind of rigid structure, I prevented myself from adapting to things, and only I got burned out. And I wasn't really effective. I was like, even though I was like working, like I showed up to work, but I was so like dead that my work was just busy work. It was just like checking off that I did the 8 hours. So after that, I kind of had a period where, first of all, I was like, finally, I can just stop doing this like constraints I set for myself. and do things more organically. But then I worked on other structures that work better for me. And yeah, I did a whole presentation about that. If you go on the Launch Cool YouTube channel, we did like a week of presentations, like different students. I don't know if you heard about that, about like study habits. So I did a presentation about that. All of the things there are old, because like I said, it's been 6 months since then, and I've evolved like basically every part of all my systems again for my routine. That was a long-winded answer. Did I answer your question, Rich? Do you want me to elaborate maybe on some specific part?
No, that did answer my question. Thank you. I think, and that's the thing. I realized that, you know, at the end of the day, you have to realize you have to know yourself as a student, and that's why you have to keep testing all these tools and tools and tools until you finally figure out what's working for you. And so I just wanted to kind of pick your brain to see what what worked for you and what didn't. But I was my follow-up question was gonna be about, okay, like you mentioned, like organically now you're not so dialed into every single hour that, you know, you're not constricting yourself with your schedule. But is that explained and discussed in the YouTube video? Because I'll just check that out afterwards.
Yeah, somewhat. Somewhat, like a lot of the things there I'm still doing now, though, like I said, I've learned more about myself since then. But the basic gist is that I have a lot of things that provide structure and accountability and direction, but the plan is very adjustable. I'm constantly responding. My plan is sort of there just to give me an idea of my direction, and kind of, let's say this month, I kind of looked at my month. What do I want to do? How am I going to spend my time? But I don't, I'm not like harsh on myself if I adjust it, because I understand what I'm doing is a discovery process and I need to adjust when things change. And I think the most important thing for me as far as structure is that basically I break my day down into cycles where I work for a period of time and then I kind of do things to recover. So in fact, I do it 1 hour and a half, like focus on something, and then kind of like a break after, and then I come back. And this starts like early in the morning, like at 7. And yeah, I found that structure works for me, though it kind of evolved over time. I'm not sure if it would work if you just started doing that. I kind of started with 45 minutes, I think 45 minutes, 15-minute breaks, and then I increased that. But yeah, I think the most important thing is just making it easy to get started. Kind of reduce the friction, eliminate the friction to start the thing you want to do. Make the kind of activation energy low. And part of that is by designing your environment to make that simple. And another part of it is sort of making decisions in advance, right? You don't want to start at your desk and go, oh, what am I going to do? You want to come to your desk and know your intention already, ideally. By the way, everything I say is kind of fungible. Like I don't get it right 100% of the time. But these are kind of the principles. Speaking of this, I really want to do a presentation again with everything I've learned, kind of redo it. If you want, I'll just write your name down, and instead of watching that video, you can watch a new presentation, and that'll become my accountability. Yeah,
Sure.
so the 1 hour 30 minutes, like I got that from Andrew Huberman when he was talking about the trading cycles. That's what I was like, let me ditch my other time and try this, and it really worked out well.
I have another question. So when you, because you talked before about how you, for example, when you have to do a project, you have to at some point study something that, well, is not covered in the curriculum, or yeah, something that you want to learn. So how do you approach that? Because like I feel so good in the launch school environment and in the like the methodology that they use, and then I fear that if I go out there again to learn something on my own, I will be completely lost, like where to start. How do you approach learning something outside of the curriculum?
Hmm. That's a really, like, for me to fully lay out everything I know about that, it would be like a whole presentation, like 2 hours. But basically, I follow the same pattern as I do when I study launch school stuff. It's just the material might not be the same quality. I need to pick different, like a combination of sources in order to get the full picture. And like the sketch of my learning process first starts with exposing myself as early as I can. If I know I'm gonna learn something, then just try it like beforehand. Like just expose myself to it and start, I don't know, kind of stewing, getting the understanding boiling in advance. Like, so if I'm doing the 170 course, I might like ask another student doing 180 to explain what they're learning or join their study session. And I did that, and I looked, actually, yeah, I did that like in 101. I went for a 180 session and they were writing SQL stuff and explaining things, and I was bewildered. To say the least, I was like, what the? I'm not following anything. But so I actually quit that session early because I felt it was even a little too early. But I still think it was worth it to spend those 15 minutes and just see what they're doing and kind of soak it in, even though I don't understand. Because the result was it kindled my interest, right? It's like you're how to say, you're trying to light this fire of learning, of understanding, like really like blazing, right? But you, like a fire, you don't like start fire with like big logs, right? You start with kindling something that's so that's a bit. I set up the kindling way in advance of the course, and it's really just what am I curious about? Let me give it a sniff. let me take a look and kind of invest gradually. I think that helps a lot. Sort of that pre-exposure, and then when I do start the course, I'm very like practice first. For me, consuming information is the least important part of learning. It's almost like a detail. Like you could almost skip it, though. No, you can't. You still need a clear explanations of concepts, or else even if you play around with the things, you won't get the full picture. But I start with like doing the exercises, even though I can't do it. Sometimes I can. Sometimes I can just do them, like let's say just to 10. I already knew quite a bit of JavaScript. If I did the exercises, yeah, sure, some things I might have missed, like there's like details or like strings, empty strings are falsy, empty arrays are truthy, and that kind of like, but it's already, that's like a much better way of learning that, because you're making a prediction and then you see it was false and you're surprised, and then you learn the correct thing, and that memory is so much more solid than if you just read that piece of information out of context. So that's why part of why I start with practice, again, the quizzes, and I start, let's say today, I was learning about the event loop and asynchronous programming. These are concepts I've been exposed to many times over the last 2 years, but haven't dug into in detail. So what I started with was, like if I share my screen, you'll see I had some notes. I opened up a JS file and started typing up comments like, okay, what is asynchronous programming in JavaScript? And I start answering what I thought I knew, or what some things I couldn't answer would be like, what are the ways of doing asynchronous programming in JavaScript? There's callbacks, and then I think there was this other thing I forgot, and then there's promises. And then it turns out there's only callbacks and promises, or as far as I know now. And yeah, so I start with questioning myself, and it's kind of like, your brain is kind of this network of neurons, and your understanding has like a similar thing. Like it's like, I have problems with my pens. We need to fix that. What? My bad. Bye-bye, Jason. Thanks for coming. Good questions. So, bye there, Rich. Bye there, Ashish. Have a nice day. Yeah. So kind of your structure of understanding is a network, and different ideas are connected to each other. And how you learn something is by integrating new ideas into the network. So basically connecting what you already know to what you're trying to understand is the fundamental way your brain learns, because like that's its structure. You can't learn something without adding it to the network. So when you're trying to learn something new, you want to activate what you already understand so that it's kind of like fresh. Like you've exposed the structure of what you already understand, and then it's easy to connect things to those points. So by asking myself questions like, what is the event loop? Even though I don't really know it yet, on my board, like on the other side, I tried drawing it kind of just from memory, like the bits and pieces I heard. And once I did that whole exercise, that's when I watched a presentation on the event loop they have in the lesson. And when I watched it, like, I don't know how, for me, it felt like I had all the puzzle pieces, and so maybe I was missing some. I couldn't quite make the full picture. But once I watched it, it just like fit in everything. I just understood it like one watch of the video. I won't need to watch it again. I will need to make flashcards. So right, like by exposing the structure, it becomes easier for me to understand the new thing in terms of what I already know, make the explicit connections. And then the other part of understanding is once you understood something in terms of what you already know, then you can apply it. That's what shows that it's been integrated meaningfully into the network. And by the way, I'm not just making this up off the cuff. This is from a researcher or I learned this whole idea, this mental model from the blog post of a researcher, like cognitive neuroscientist who studies learning and memory, and consults with like schools about how to teach based on her research. Her name is Efrat First. I can type it in here.
Kind of reminds me of the learning how to learn course that was in the prep courses for us to watch, where she talked about how new neurons are formed when you learn something new. Yeah, so kind of your sketch that reminds me of that, and also reminds me of the internet, because I'm in 171 right now. But yeah, okay, gotcha. I've read first. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and just to kind of close that process. So first like exposure, and then like practice, and quizzing, and explanation, and then a little bit of consuming information. And then as soon as I watched that presentation, uh, it just so happened I had a study session later right after with a friend, and I explained to him like he hadn't learned asynchronous programming, so it was like the perfect like practice to explain what I had just learned. Um, and once we did that, like we just like practiced some examples, basically all like, okay, if this is true, then what if we did this, kind of refining our mental model. And I think right now, like I'm good with like the basics of asynchronous programming in JavaScript, but that was because I had a lot of exposure before. It just so happened that I had that luxury. And then I started with the practice and then explanation. And I hope I won't. Sometimes I skimp a little on the flashcards, just sort of because I can skip them and there's like no consequence like immediately, right? Only when I forget later do I realize, oh, should have made that.
Yeah.
But I'll try to eat my vegetables after this.
Okay, great. Thank you for your response. Yeah, so it makes sense. So your advice, so my takeaway is that exposure first, like not try to study everything about, for example, a framework. You might want to play around with it a bit, or and then gradually start learning the more I don't know, conceptual or understanding the theoretical part of it, kind of.
Mm, not necessarily, actually. Let me
Okay.
flip that. Really, the exposure can be any side, can be the theoretical or the practical. But it's really about kindling your curiosity. So starting up the feedback loop of being curious, having that motivation, that desire, and then learning something and experiencing the reward so that you start growing the feedback loop and just accelerating the learning. So like let's say with React right now, I've had a lot of exposure. I've used it to build like a website like more than a year ago. And I've seen it used in different things. But right now I'm interested really in how it works, like what it's doing, like as far as the DOM, like the kind of basics of the front end development. And I'm just exposing myself to that. I'm not committing yet to like learning deeply and using it as a tool, like in the same way, let's say I'm committed to like learning the course I'm doing now. But I'm exposing myself gradually. And yeah, so I apply the same process to as what I'm doing to law school to other things. It's just there's some tricky things involved. I think especially with consuming information. It's really easy when you learn about something new to sort of open a bunch of pages, a bunch of people explain this, so many things, and then not quite do anything. So there is some skill there and sort of creating boundaries, restrictions, and saying, being clear about what you want to learn exactly and what is sufficient. Because you can keep reading about React. You can keep reading about like every topic, like there's endless things. But for me, I've gotten good at, or I've gotten good. I still sometimes spend time just kind of reading sort of aimlessly, but sometimes I clear-headed enough to be like, oh, this isn't helpful, and just pick up, okay, this is what I want to learn. How does React render to the screen? The elements, what do I need for that? This resource is good. Let me practice and do the things there. And then, but yeah, I think there's a lot of like subtleties and like tacit knowledge involved in learning on your own, and knowing what sort of gear to be in. Like Chris talks about a lot about just-in-time learning versus like mastery-based learning, and how on the job, and for things that aren't as valuable like long-term, you don't necessarily need to do mastery-based learning. Like you might use a lot of tools, but you don't necessarily need to know like them deeply,
Yeah.
unless like it just happens to be really important. Even then, so kind of like there's an element of like picking your battles, and understanding your overall strategy, where you want to go with your learning, like beyond launch school, and then kind of keeping things concrete and limited. That allows you to like do stuff. But if you sort of keep them fuzzy and kind of unlimited, there's all these things I could learn, then you can't take action. So it's getting good at picking your battles and making things concrete, and then you apply the same process. It's just maybe the style of the resources, how they explain things is different.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
So it's been it's been just an hour and 11 minutes. Okay, we start at 1 p.m. I'm free to stay longer if people have questions. So go ahead and share or ask.
Uh, I can ask one more question. So I don't know if you have been planning to do Capstone all along, or is it something that you decided at some point in the way? But if you weren't doing Capstone, if you can like imagine yourself in that position, what would you do like after core or during core in order to prepare yourself for a job just with core?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, before giving an answer, I would like to say like I would like to give a disclaimer. Like, there's what I would do, and maybe that's not the right way, but it's kind of how I think about it. But how I've thought about this because I have been interested to do Capstone basically since the first day I learned about logical. I read down, was like, I want to do something hard, basically. But I'm just considering in case it doesn't work out, what would I do? That scenario. I think the first thing during core is I think it's worth it to spend more time working on your own projects, because you need to build up that muscle, that skill of independently achieving something, because it's different from solving one problem, right? You need to find a problem it's usually vague. There aren't instructions for what the other, like all the parts are, what you need to figure out, and you need to break it down. And eventually you break it down enough that you have something like a PEDAC problem you solved, right? You'd solve during the courses. And then you also have to kind of, there's a whole psychological, mental aspect to being determined to complete a project once you start it, like learning to, finish things. And then there's the confidence to do things you don't know how to do at the start. Before doing a browser extension, I didn't know really much about that. I just used AdBlock and other things. And I just read the documentation and took my time and learned how to build one. And all the tools I needed to do that too. So I think it's worth it to gradually just do stuff on your own, so that by the time you finish core, you'll have maybe a small portfolio already, or maybe you haven't actually put together a portfolio, but you have projects you can put in the portfolio, and just start applying immediately. You'll have built like some tacit knowledge around how to complete a project like that, built up your confidence, have a more rounded view of web development and the different things that exist out there that you can do. And I think once you start building projects and thinking about project ideas, you just get flooded with them. Like I said earlier, I have a database of ideas, and it's just, I keep getting ideas. I have this problem, like, oh, I could do that, and I write it down. And I won't execute on all of them, just a few. But I've read like articles and heard different people have told me at the end of the curriculum that they felt they didn't know what they wanted to do after, like as far as projects or how to go about organizing that. And I think if they had built up their confidence, started building up their confidence earlier by doing their own thing and gradually building up the complexity, it would have been easier to get started after core, like less activation energy. So that's the main thing. And then otherwise, I think like after core, like it depends on your objectives too, what the market is in your area and what kind of companies you're aiming for. Like your strategy will be highly dependent on that. But I guess I would just start applying more for like probing, like maybe even before core, I would start applying, just to probe the market and see what I get. Like, and I know what amount of effort I'd give. I'd probably try to do something like for 2-3 weeks while I'm doing a course. I'll also focus on applying, and to like, I don't know how I'd frame it, maybe like not to the companies I want to work for, because I don't want to apply to them now. But practices where I kind of would maybe work for them, but this is for practice. And I'm trying to get at least one interview. I don't know. I'm just making up stuff, like ideas I have. So I take a moment to really like send out like 200, 300 applications, right? Because you might get rejected like 95% of the time, or like not hear anything back, depending on how you apply. So I'll try to get at least one interview and get that like boost, confidence boost. And if you get an offer, all the merrier. And yeah, but after core, I think it really depends on your market. What's the culture in your country about career transitioners in the software industry? Like there's a lot of factors there. I would probably ask Chris for help.
Yeah. Yeah, well, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. So right now I'm basically at the point of I'm thinking about what I could possibly start working on like a project or a small project or something. So yeah. And I'm actually thinking of maybe after finishing the backend portion, start applying, as you said, like just to see what's going on, or yeah. No, I'll see how that works out.
I think you like people who've done core have a really good shot like at finding a job because they're good. So it's just about just a little extra stuff to get there.
Yeah.
Offer. Okay, so this has been a great QA, or it's been enjoyable for me. I hope it's been helpful to you and the others who've left already. I'm not sure if you were there when I gave the disclaimer that I am recording this and I want to share it with the spot. Since you're around, at least you can rubber stamp that it's okay. I think I should ask the others too, like in the thread or something.
Yeah, actually, when I opened Slack, it gave me this warning that this meeting is recorded. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's good to know. So I guess that's why some of the others maybe turned on their camera.
Yeah,
if
maybe.
that bothered them. So that works out well then. Great. All right.
Yeah.
It was great talking with you, Antonia. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.